thing that I love about couch flipping in this industry is that it's low barrier to entry and your success is primarily determined by
you got to get your actual business acumen up to speed with where you're at. I think a lot of people think that because this is a bootstrappable industry, that it's a shortcut around having to learn that stuff. And honestly, it isn't.
A common complaint among couch flippers is my listings aren't getting views. I'm being shadow banned. And no one really knows.
In the world of decor and couch flipping, there are other ways to do this through eBay and other sites. But ultimately, Facebook for now is the gold standard among most consumers.
Oftentimes, it's doing the things that you don't want to do that serve a greater purpose. Being part of something that's bigger than yourself that gives you meaning in your life. So I'm a huge proponent of this idea of, love what you do at some level. Welcome to another episode of the Couch Pod. Today, I'm joined by Chris Leonard, an independent consultant and business coach who's helped dozens of small business owners all the way up to the Fortune 500 reclaim time in their day and have their business run more smoothly. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So Chris, I know you've been working with a couch flipper out in Nashville, Tennessee. Phil, if you're listening to this podcast, shout out to Phil. What do you think about the industry just kind of overseeing and providing mentorship so far?
I think it's a tremendous industry because there's not enough things in the economy right now where somebody who wants to own their own business and get control of their life can bootstrap something if they've got just $1,000 in a garage. And couch flipping is one of the best opportunities to do that. Look, you don't have the capital to go start your own technology company. You don't have the capital to start a coffee shop or a restaurant all by yourself. Like, you're talking about millions invested to get to the point of one of those things. But this is a dream you can achieve now. Like, this is something that most people have within their grasp if they already have a decent job. And the transition from there to doing this relatively full-time can be relatively quick if you've got a lot of work ethic, dedication to it, and a pretty good built-in market.
Such a great point. I think there's immense desire, or in the American zeitgeist right now, is people want to be independent, work for themselves, have a side hustle. The traditional 9-to-5 is not economically working out for most people, right? We're seeing the middle class absolutely get crushed right now. And if you want to start a business, what do you do? Like, on the one hand, maybe you buy an information product, you start drop shipping and get into cryptocurrency, day trading, that kind of stuff. On the other hand, you can buy a business or you can get into a franchise or start up a business. But as you said, the startup capital, the barrier to entry for that is extremely high. And the thing that I love about couch flipping in this industry is that it's low barrier to entry and your success is primarily determined by how hard you work. Now, one thing I've seen, though, is that people get started couch flipping and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It is backbreaking work. And so many people tend to get started and they get into a rhythm of things, but they kind of get stuck. And I was just talking to someone. He booked a one-on-one consulting call with me like earlier this year, and then booked another one with me literally this week. And he's like, man, I'm stuck at like $5,000-$6,000 in revenue, and I really want to grow. I don't know what to do. And I looked at my notes from the previous session, and he had said the exact same things in the previous session, and he was in the exact same place as the most recent session. So what do you say to someone who's feeling that rubbing up against, what they think is a limitation in the business, especially so early on?
I think a lot of businesses, once they get their traction, hit an inflection point where in order to scale, the things that got you here aren't going to get you where you're going. And a lot of times that has to do with Facebook as a platform, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit, and the limitations of that and the way that Meta kind of doesn't want Marketplace to be a seed ground for small businesses to grow. They kind of want it to be neighbors to neighbors only. And so once you kind of grow to that point where like this is starting to be a going concern and you're ready to start thinking about going full time, your strategy's got to change. And so that starts to think about more like a traditional business, a little bit more like a storefront without a storefront. And you got to have things like a marketing strategy and an operational strategy. And you got to get your actual business acumen up to speed with where you're at. I think a lot of people think that because this is a bootstrappable industry, that it's a shortcut around having to learn that stuff. And honestly, it isn't. At least if you want to do it full time sustainably, you're still going to have to learn those things, and better now than never.
So you're hinting at a little bit of an insidious motive here with Facebook Marketplace, and maybe not insidious, but at least capitalistic. Maybe you could break that down a little bit. Why do you think Facebook wants to keep you where you're at as, dealing neighbor neighbor to neighbor transactionally as opposed to building a business?
Yeah, to some degree, I think it's actually hard to say, but I think it's because they own the platform, and the platform benefits from the maximum number of eyes. And a business, by definition, is going to benefit from taking the eyes off of that platform and to somewhere else. And so if you've got a deep inventory or a whole storefront of your own and you're trying to funnel business to that, that's not really what they're trying to build there, because that means you're going to click off to your own site. You're going to click off to somebody else's page or go close your computer and walk into someplace. And that is not helping them sell advertisements. Look, Facebook, at the end of the day, yeah, it's this cool technology product that does 1,000 different things. They are in the advertising business. They exist to sell advertising. That is the number one thing that drives their business. And if what you're doing for them is not adding to their ad revenue, they're going to try to find a way for you to not do that thing. And so, yeah, that's their motivation. I mean, they're in the ad business and they don't have another stream of income. They could take a percentage of your sales, but then you're talking about eBay instead of Facebook. There's other competitors out there and they all have their own drawbacks. But ultimately, you're probably going to outgrow Facebook as a platform at some point in your trajectory. And what you do about that is one of the biggest decisions that you got to make.
Absolutely. And thank you so for putting it so eloquently. Like, I've kind of grappled with this subject before, but I don't think I've quite able to hit the nail on the head as you did. But yeah, like, absolutely. So a common complaint among couch flippers is my listings aren't getting views. I'm being shadow banned. And no one really knows. No one person can say, this is why a particular listing was shown to this specific individual in this circumstance, right? That's just determined by the algorithm, and people work on the algorithm, but no one knows exactly what input leads to what output. But you can reason from first principles. What are the general incentives and what are the general things that what are the general behaviors that Facebook wants to incentivize, and therefore have a better understanding of how to navigate these platforms?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, look, again, there are platforms that are much more friendly toward being the seedbed for e-commerce businesses. eBay is very comfortable with that. In the music industry space, Reverb is very comfortable with that. There's a lot of shops that just post all their stuff to Reverb, and that's just the thing that gets people in the door if they're in their area, and they occasionally will do some mail business. In the world of decor and couch flipping, there are other ways to do this through eBay and other sites, but ultimately Facebook for now is the gold standard among most consumers for how they get stuff. So thinking big about what your strategy is in the future, it's going to be really individualized because there's not one solution that's going to fit everybody in every area. It's going to be a combination of your interests, your strengths, your passions, your area, what your market is like, what else is going on economically in your area. So there is not going to be one strategy that's the same for everybody that's going to work everywhere. But if you come up with a strategy, what you're going to find is that there's a lot more ways to reach customers than Facebook. It doesn't have to be super expensive, but yeah, there's going to be some sweat equity in it, particularly because when you're trying to hit on your strategy, your first try is probably not going to work. And you're going to have to be like Thomas Edison going into the lab, failing to invent the light bulb for 2 years at a time until you come up with the design that works, and then you're off and running.
So in other words, Facebook is not there to launch your business. You have to be the one to take the initiative to launch your business. And maybe we could draw that distinction between being a marketplace seller and being a real business owner. How would you distinguish the two?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple inflection points that you come to. One is where you start to think about owning your own platform for selling. So for some people like Phil, that's a Shopify site. For another one of my clients, they also just graduated to their own storefront really recently. For other people, they may never do that, but they may diversify their digital platforms and go and get a whole bunch of take part in other digital platforms. Garage sales, a lot of people still do a steady business on Craigslist. Instrument sellers, of course, are on Reverb. That's the second thing, is like finding what your platform is. Third is like having an actual strategy. And then fourth, I've talked a little bit about the strategy and we'll talk more about it soon, but I think fourth is like a team. Once the revenue gets to the point where you're killing more than you can eat and there's more work than you can sustain do, that's where you're starting to bring in some help. I mean, some of you may have already hired delivery drivers. Some people may have hired cleaning crews. The stages that you're at as far as when to delegate, what to delegate, how much to delegate is a pretty individualized decision that really flows from your physical capacities, your strengths, your passions, et cetera, and what else you have going on in this life. I think when you cross over from side hustle to business, whether you're even making a full living at it or not, it can still be a business that's only responsible for half your income. But it's when you need help, it's when your strategy starts to outgrow just putting stuff on one platform, as opposed to thinking about all the range of platforms available to you and what's going to be the right thing for you to reach your customers.
Absolutely. And I really love that additional distinction you added about being a sole proprietor or like an individual freelancer versus a business. It necessitates the incorporation of the labor of other people. You need to build a team.
Everybody knows Ivy Flip's app is the best way to source couches on Facebook, Craigslist, and OfferUp. But did you know Ivy Flip is also the best way to post couches too? Imagine a world where you list your couch once, and it magically appears across all major marketplaces. That's not a dream, it's your new reality with Ivy Flip. Ivy Flip isn't just a tool. It's your strategic partner in turning your flipping hustle into a thriving, efficient empire. Elevate your couch flipping business today. Discover the power of cross-listing with Ivy Flip. Try the Ivy Flip app today for free. Search Ivy Flip in the Google Play Store or Apple iOS Store now, or click the link in bio.
Yes. Building teams is honestly what got me into this business. I have spent most of my career as a builder of teams in big corporations, as a consultant, in technology startups. And then I got into executive coaching, entrepreneur coaching, small business coaching through that lens, having been in gigantic enterprises and had to solve problems at that scale. It's a lot different solving problems at a smaller scale because the problems are all existential. There is no problem that like the business can just survive and just limp by without solving this for 5 years. What's fun about it is that one person, usually the entrepreneur, gets to wear every hat for a little while. And so you as a person right now get to touch every part of your business. And then you eventually, this great gift, you get to give away the things that don't give you as much joy in your business and keep the ones that do. For Taylor and Phil, I mean, that's a client where it's easy to draw the distinction. Connecting with the people at the shop is what gives Phil a lot of joy, and sourcing the supply. He loves to hunt. And then Taylor really, really loves to reach out to customers. And like, for a lot of people, this is a great vehicle to do content creation through. You know, I have another client who loves telling stories. This business for her is a means to an end to get on social media and tell interesting stories about her customers, and other people she's known. And those stories, as a byproduct, just happen to connect people to stuff they need. But there's 1,000 other ways she wants to do that besides this. So I say that to help you understand that understanding yourself and what your mission is and why you want to do this beyond just like, I need to get out of this crappy 9 to 5, is going to be really important to figuring out what your strategy and what your winning formula is going to be.
Yeah, and now we have a clear distinction between side hustle and real business. And I definitely want to dig deeper into that because I know it's a problem that a lot of our audience struggles with. But I do want to take a quick diversion and hear a little bit about your experience building world-class teams, because I think this is probably underappreciated and something that people, as they're scaling up, are going to have to grapple with. How would you apply those lessons from your career and your experience to the average couch flipper trying to build a team?
Yeah, at the largest level of abstraction, I start with people here. If you could build a billion-dollar corporation by yourself, then you shouldn't ever hire anybody. You should just do it. But if there's anything you don't know how to do or can't personally do all by yourself or automate, then you're going to need other people in order to build this thing to the level you want it to be at, whether that's a billion-dollar corporation or something that just feeds your family or the million degrees in between. And so the question then is what and who and how. So once you've decided on what, as an outgrowth of what you don't want to do, what doesn't give you joy, what you can't physically or mentally do, then it's a question of how many people do I need and how do I make that work? Look, my experience growing teams is, this comes from the old book, Good to Great, as well as a bunch of other places, but you need to figure out what the
Jim Collins.
Yeah, Jim Collins. Yeah, classic, man. I'm weird. I'm so weird. I read Good to Great at the age of 12, right after finishing Lord of the Rings, because my dad was a business coach. I happened to have gone into the family business by accident. Whoops. But I'm weird. So I read that book at 12 and it made an enormous impact. And one of the things in that book is getting the right people on the right seats on the bus. And so what are the things I don't love doing? Okay, you make a list of them. Your delivery driver, your cleaner, your checkout person, whatever it is at your stage. Oftentimes the first person that you bring in is going to do 5 jobs because you can't just make a completely siloed role for everybody early in a business. It's not how it works. But if you imagine down the road, we're going to have, this is the operation, this is the organism. It's going to have 2 hands, 2 feet, a couple of fingers, a nose, and some eyes. Like then you start to figure out, okay, well, who are these people likely to be and what do I need to find to do this? Okay. The hardest thing once you bring in other people is immediately, and especially the more people you bring in, it's going to take time away from doing the work to communicating. This is a shock to people. I coach a lot of software engineers too. And the shock to software engineers after they come out of software school is they think they're going to spend all their time with headphones on and their hands on a keyboard. And then people keep bringing them these stupid meetings. And they're like, this is not what I got into this for. I'm spending 4 hours a day in meetings and I'm not programming. Well, guess what? That is always the case when we're building teamwork. Teamwork is a team sport. We are here to do this thing together because none of us could do this alone. We have to build something bigger than the sum of its parts. That means we're all going to have to talk to each other sometimes. And how do we communicate? When do we communicate? Where do we communicate? And how do we keep it from being a total waste of time? That's a big part of the art of building a high-performing team. And so as a facilitator, a talker, I got to be a world-class talker to do this well. And so that's part of why I love doing it, is because I love bringing a group of people together, setting the table and helping them do the thing. If you want to build a high-performing team, there's got to be a part of you that knows how to do that and loves doing it. But honestly, if you're a parent, you've done this before. If you can get 2 kids out the door with their shoes on and their clothes on the right way and their hair not a mess, guess what? You already know how to do this at some scale. And it's applying those same skills in a different setting with different people.
Right. And there, as a parent or as an employer, there are different incentives you can use, positive and negative. And as a culture, we could probably say that the positive ones are probably.
Yeah. But I mean, we all have a negative incentive to work. Every single one of us knows the outcome of just never working. And if you're listening to this podcast, then you've probably already decided that's not an outcome that you want for you. But there's a lot of other negative outcomes of not working. Personally, if I'm between jobs for a long time or my business goes through a slowdown, I get really sad. I feel adrift. I feel kind of alone in the world. Work is an avenue of great connection and meaning if you can let it be. Look, I believe that your work won't love you back, but I also believe that the people you work with can love you back. And so building a team that feels like a family is one of the most rewarding things that you can give yourself as a business owner as this thing matures.
Absolutely. I mean, you spend so much of your life working, and maybe it's by necessity, but oftentimes it's doing the things that you don't want to do that serve a greater purpose, being part of something that's bigger than yourself that gives you meaning in your life. So I'm a huge proponent of this idea of, love what you do at some level. And this is, I think, why so many people are drawn in 2025 to the idea of entrepreneurship, to the idea of something like couch flipping, because they can do it for themselves and they feel a connection to their work and the team, that the people that are around them. So pivoting the conversation back to the original thread here, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen for our couch flippers is they get started, things are going good. Maybe they're making more money flipping couches than they've ever made in their life, but then comes a slowdown. The algorithm is not as favorable. Their listings aren't getting views. They think they're shadow banned. And it's at this point that they start thinking about calling it quits, or for the ones that have this will to power, this drive to survive and seek the next level, that's when they start thinking about diversification, getting off of Facebook Marketplace, building a real business. And there are multiple ways that you could start a furniture business. One way is by starting flipping and bootstrapping and brick by brick building up your business. The other is you just invest a lump sum at the beginning. You take out loans, or maybe you've saved up capital over time. And if you had chosen the latter path, then maybe you had never had exposure to Facebook Marketplace, and you would have had to have developed a marketing plan and strategy right out of the gate. And so there are multiple ways to skin the cat. But I think the challenge for flippers making this transition, crossing the chasm, if you will, is that they get so used to the easy life. They get used to the easy lead flow, the attention, the views that their business is getting. And so it's hard for them to wean off of that and stand up on their own 2 feet. So what would you say to someone who's dealing with this and wants to build a real business?
I wouldn't call it beginner's luck. I don't think that does justice to the amount of work people have to do to get there. But in hindsight, once you get through that phase, it's going to feel like it was beginner's luck, because it's that first phase as you're getting traction and Facebook hasn't shadow banned you yet is a lot easier than what comes after it. What comes after it starts with 2 things that you need to get a handle on. They're pretty simple questions, but people put off addressing them because they don't seem like it's going to move the needle, because it seems far from actually getting more sales. And that is, you need to know you better and you need to know your customer better. Who am I and what do I want doing business with me to feel like? Why would someone fall in love with doing business with me, right? Second, who are these people who are buying from me, and why are they buying from me instead of going to Ashley Furniture? Is it just about price for them, or is there something else? What is this something else that is driving people to me? Why is it that my listings are standing out to people? If you're not talking to your customers, if you're not collecting the data they're already giving you and keeping track of it, you're missing the opportunity to know them. What do I mean by know your customers? There's a thing that every small business needs to have, which is called an ideal customer or client profile, an ICP, not the kind that spits Fago on a stage, the kind that helps you know who your customer is. ICPs, or sometimes they're called avatars, are sort of broad, dull groups of customers that you have identified as like big groups that you can generalize down to. Yeah, I know a lot of my customers fit into this bucket, and there's a lot more out there like this. For instance, with couch flippers, oftentimes it's upper middle class people living in the suburbs who redecorate every couple of years. Sometimes times it's, once you get into more business to business type of sales, which I'd love to talk more about, it's say real estate stagers or vacation rental decorators. People who buy a lot of stuff go through, there's two dimensions you need to focus on when you're describing these. What's called the demographic and the psychographic. The psychographic is like, what does it feel like to talk to these people? If you're to have a conversation with one of them, what do they talk about and what do they talk like? Are they fast talkers? Do they love recommending places to you? Are they slow talkers? Are they just good listeners? Are these people who are super outgoing and extroverted and know your name and have that Bill Clinton thing where they never forget a face and a name? Or are they somebody who is like totally focused on the data and those are different types of people out there. What are your customers like in that dimension? Write it all down. What hobbies do they have? What causes do they give to? What are their values? What are the things they care about? And what do they dress like? Where do they shop? What else are they buying? What do they eat? What kind of food do they like? That's the psychographic stuff. The demographic stuff, by contrast, is the stuff you could filter a spreadsheet for. It's like hard data type stuff. My customers are between 35 and 42. My customers make $150,000 a year or more. My customers almost all have advanced postgraduate, whatever it is. One of the most valuable you can have for marketing purposes is, besides those things, zip code. What zip codes are your customers located in? If you're to do a direct mail campaign to tell people about an upcoming sale, knowing what zip codes to send mail to is really, really valuable to targeting your ad spend in the best possible place.
Even if you're targeting on Facebook.
Yeah, even on Facebook. You got to nail down those two things first of all. And you might have not just one set of ideal customers, but two or three. One business I work with identified that pet owners were a huge, huge market of theirs. And they couldn't figure out why, but it was just like, oh yeah, their pets tear up their couches all the time. Of course, of course they need new couches all the time and they need them at a bargain. They're not going to buy a $5,000 couch new at Restoration Hardware. They need a deal because this thing's going to have a short lifespan for them because of the darn dogs. And so like when you know them, you can find other opportunities for connecting with. For instance, people who have a lot of pets are often active as pet foster care. They may know rescue organizations or humane societies who need to foster dogs or cats at homes for a little while. And they're connected on the mailing lists of these places, which, by the way, are always hard up for content for their mailing lists and would be more than happy to run an article by you about how to clean pet fur off of your furniture or how to get pee stains out of a couch cushion because you've had to do it 1,000. Spreading that knowledge for free to those kinds of places puts you in front of the kind of people who already want to buy from you. And so I give that example because once you know your customer, it's really going to help you figure out where they are, what they're paying attention to, what they value, and what path you have to reach them. That's a lot more powerful than just hoping Facebook puts you at the top of the algorithm. Absolutely. So that's why you need the strategy in the ICP.
Yeah, and I love how we're taking more of a strategic angle here because people jump right into running a Facebook campaign, and there is a technical component of that. Especially if you're learning it for the first time, maybe middling execution, and that definitely can be the source of why your Facebook campaigns aren't performing well. It's just a lack of technical execution. But more often than not, I see people ramble into these campaigns without a strategy or a process. And I think a big part of where this problem originates from is if you think about how the average couch flipper gets started, they're getting couches for free. They're not necessarily being selective. Like they are kind of just taking what they can get. And therefore, they're getting a wide variety of different items that would appeal to a wide variety of different people. And so as they're transacting with customers on Facebook Marketplace, there isn't an obvious pattern that emerges as being the ICP that I should target. And so because of the lack of pre-selection in the inventory, there's a lack of pattern recognition in the customer. So if you're a flipper going through this for the first time and you're trying to map out your ICP, how would you go collecting this data and then using that to form a thesis about who your customers are and why you should be targeting them?
You're probably making some kind of personal connections with your customers at some point. And because you have access to their Facebook profile a lot of times, there's certain things you know about them. You know some demographic facts about a person that you've interacted with on Facebook just right from the blush. And if you're keeping track of these people, if you're keeping a spreadsheet of the people that you have sold to in the past, especially if they're, say, giving you an email address, you're starting to collect some data that can tell you who they are. And to go crunch that data and see what the big groups are is going to help you figure that out. But also on the supply side, it can be just as valuable to figure out what are the through lines with your suppliers. Look, you do this thing for 3 or 4 years, you're going to notice that your couches are all coming from certain neighborhoods, certain types of people, and with certain kinds of homes, right? You're going to be able to go drive through a neighborhood and go, I bet they would give me a couch someday. You're like, you got an eye for this stuff if you know your stuff, and I bet most of you do. So like, what are the through lines there? What do these people have in common? What are you noticing? It could be that there's 3 or 4 completely divergent types out there that have nothing to do with each other, but that all have something to do with you. Great. Try to identify them. But use data. Gather the data. Don't just let it slip through your fingers. And this is harder for some people than others. Some of you are natural social butterflies, and like your favorite thing about this is interacting with customers and hearing their stories and meeting their kids. And some of you like just want to be left alone and to get on Facebook and just to do the work and keep your head down. And you're like really naturally introverted, and that people stuff drains you. Talking to people is how you learn about people, and hearing their stories is going to be really valuable. People, just when you chit chat with them, will tell you so much more than if you were trying to like intentionally research them. So just be curious about people and talk to them like people, and try to enjoy their company, because I mean, heck, you're going to go through this day in this life anyway. You might as well try to enjoy the people that you got to interact with, especially if you don't like interacting with customers, this business is probably going to drain you in the long run. So get good at it. It's not just a personality trait, though it's personality trait inflected. It is a thing you can get good at and learn to enjoy. I'm personally not wired for small talk with strangers, but I have become very good at small talk with strangers because it's been just an occupational need of mine, and now I really enjoy it. You can too. I would encourage you to get good at it, because that's how you're going to really get to know those things that make people want to do business with you, and that tell you what kind of business can be scalable and viable for your future.
Right. The small talk is not by necessity interesting, but it's how you draw out the things that are interesting in people by making them comfortable.
And people open up to the people who think they're interesting. And if you think they're boring, they're going to know that you think they're boring, and they're not going to talk to you. But if you find what's interesting in a person and you learn how to be fascinated by human beings and all their diversity and craziness and contradictoriness, then people are going to love hanging out with you, and they're going to tell you things that they would never tell anybody else. You know, some people, I got one client who just has that quality where strangers tell them her whole life story. Here's all my traumas. Here's all the worst things that ever happened. Here's the worst thing I've ever done. Isn't that crazy? And it's just like, they've never told their therapist this stuff, but they'll tell the person that they're buying a lamp from. That's out there. And some people have that skill, and it's just because they find people interesting oftentimes is why the great listeners in the world often build great relationships. So learn how to ask people good questions. And if you find that a question really resonates with a lot of people and gets them to open up, you keep that question around. Become a great collector of questions. I try to be as a coach.
So the first step is unearthing the information, getting the stories, talking to people, learning about their motivations. That's step one. But step two, I think, can be trickier for some people, which is, okay, now you have the data, but you may not be able to connect the dots, right? Maybe you don't have that intuition or that ability to just, see the trend, see the pattern. So if you're in that category, once you have the data, what do you do?
At this point, if you've got the data and you figured out what unites these people, I would take a whiteboard, a spreadsheet, a piece of paper, and draw out the big groups of people, right? Give them a name, the suburban redecorator, the pet owner with lots of dogs, the perennial mover, whatever it is. Like, you'll find these groups of people and you can give them a shorthand name. If you know who they are, next thing you need to know is you. Who are you? What are your values? What is your voice? What do you want to sound like when you interact with people? Do you want to sound funny, irreverent? Do you want to sound serious? Do you want to sound sincere? Is it about, some people are very like religiously motivated with their business. Do they want to spread the gospel as a way of as like the ultimate means to the end of their business? Like, know that about yourself. Say that about yourself and figure out, okay, if that's true, then what do I want it to feel like to interact with my business? Do I want to be remembered as funny, as kind, as insightful, as like creatively stimulating? What is the thing about? And this should be something where your friends, if you described yourself this way to your friends, they'd all nod their head like, yeah, that sounds like you. If you know those things, then you can start to design a brand that expresses those values. And you can sit down with anybody who knows aesthetic type of things and figure out, okay, what types of fonts match that kind of personality? What type of colors match that kind of personality? What kind of designs, et cetera? If you've got the brand, you've got the ICP, and you know yourself and your voice. Now, if you were to do, say, a Facebook campaign or a Google campaign, promote stuff, you have got your ducks in a row where you know what kinds of creative are going to resonate with that, who you need to talk to, how you can filter out the whole group of people coming to a website to focus on just the people who are most likely to click on your thing and buy from you. Especially when you're ready to get some professional help with advertising. This is catnip to, say, a marketing agency in your area who's professional at running ads with the maximum possible efficacy. When you finally give them your money, having a strategy in place makes you their dream customer and saves tons of time and money, and it makes it so much faster for them to figure out how to help you sell more couches.
Absolutely. So now we have started to establish a framework step by step. First, you unearth the data, then you name the pattern, you start to define what the ICP is, and then you start executing. So you have your thesis about who your customer is, and now you can go get the data. And the data is presented to you in a nice interface called the Facebook Business Manager, Facebook Ads Manager, where you can test your thesis and see like if one ICP is higher performing than another one.
Yeah, absolutely. Think of your early marketing experiments, whether it's digital ads, analog traditional marketing, like say a direct mail campaign or whatever, or face-to-face marketing, going to events, things like that. Whatever they are, have a hypothesis about what this is trying to accomplish for you. And a good hypothesis format that I encourage people to use in any setting, but especially marketing, is like, I think if I X, then Y will happen. Or I think if I X, then my customers will Y. You know, I think if I go to 10 networking events, that I will get 2 client leads this month. I think if I promote to 5 pet related blogs in my area, that I will get, I will sell 5 more couches this month to pet owners. Whatever the hypothesis is, figure out what it is, go test it, and actually take some data around the results to see if it's proven true or not.
Okay, amazing. I know, Chris, I know that we're a little short on time here. You had mentioned a little bit earlier you'd love to dig into B2B opportunities for couch flippers. So maybe we could conclude on that note.
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the best opportunities once you've gotten established and gotten a little bit more of a strategy is to figure out what types of businesses you can sell to, because consumers, while there's a lot of them that are going to buy from you, most of them are going to buy from you at most once or twice ever, maybe 3 times if they're a great consumer. But a lot of business types, whether they're, say, an office decorator, a vacation rental decorator, like a professional decorator for high net worth individuals, whatever it is, those are the type of people who might come in and buy 5 couches from you in a single shot and then come back later in the year and do it again. Now, they're a different type of person. They can be a lot harder to deal with in other ways. They may need a lot more hand-holding. You may have to say the same thing to them a bunch of times. They may also be really pressed for time. If you're used to operating with one type of person, then going B2B can be a totally different thing. Know the culture of the type of people you're dealing with. Real estate people are social butterflies and are often not details people until they're writing a contract. But say an office decorator who deals with big enterprises, completely different mindset, right? Nonprofits in your area are also great customers because they're probably sustainable minded, and you're keeping stuff out of the waste stream by virtue of cleaning up couches. And they really, really are on a budget and would love to get something great for cheap to decorate their office or their other spaces with. So those types of business connections are gold. A few things to check out in your area that can help you connect with business to business type buyers. Yeah, I mean, real estate is obvious. Real estate agents already want to talk to you, and they already have a great Rolodex of people like stagers and decorators that they recommend to their clients all the time. There's probably something like an arts and business council in your area. I know Nashville has a great one. That's constantly dealing with creatives who are trying to start their own businesses. There's probably also a Center for Nonprofit Management or Center for Nonprofits or whatever, the philanthropy centers and foundations in your area who are connected with nonprofits who may need to get their office decorated on short notice. And there's probably also something like an entrepreneur center or a startup incubator in your nearest city that knows a lot of small businesses, including some who might need some office furniture.
Yeah, and they're moving in and out, co-working spaces, et cetera. They need to furnish. So
yeah. So if you can identify who in there you're interested in trying to find, going through those mediating organizations to help you find those people and are interested, have a vested interest in connecting you with those people, that can be your glide path to really increasing sales.
Yeah. Actually, an idea you suggested that I never thought of applying to couch flipping is just hanging out with your hanging out in networking events thrown by your local chamber of commerce. Everyone's there to kind of schmooze, have a couple drinks, and people tend to be very friendly, and it's kind of tit for tat. So they have Rolodexes, they're able to pass you introductions, and then maybe you can pass them a favor right back in the future.
Yep. And also, a lot of these kind of organizations are frequently looking for places to host events. And so if you already have a warehouse or something like that that's climate controlled and maybe is a nice place to hang out, hosting an event at that spot to hang out, have a concert or something like that can be a great way to build goodwill and get people's hands on your merchandise.
Great idea. Great idea. Well, Chris,
Thank
I
you
don't
for
want to.
hosting me today, Charles.
Absolutely. No, it was a pleasure having you. I hope to see you on a future episode of the Couch Pod. I know you're running a little bit short today, but yeah, thank you so much.